Greg Abbott thought he could dismiss Jasmine Crockett with a smirk and a lazy insult on live television. But what he didn't expect was the storm she would summon with nothing but her voice, her facts, and the quiet power of lived experience. It began in a studio not built for fireworks, inside KCTX News in Fort Worth, where a panel of political figures had already been sparring for nearly half an hour about Texas school funding. It had been tense, layered with veiled digs and partisan barbs, but everything stopped the moment Abbott leaned forward, too calm, too smooth, like someone convinced the stage was his. He adjusted his cufflinks and said with practiced nonchalance, "Representatives like Jasmine Crockett should spend less time stirring up drama and more time doing their jobs." A few chuckles broke out, low and uncomfortable. One of the anchors tried to steer the conversation away, but Abbott waved them off and went further. "She's good at grabbing headlines, but not much else. The numbers don't lie. Her district's performance is among the worst." Then there was silence, the kind that doesn't end quickly. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She sat there like stone, like something forged instead of born. People expected an explosion, but what came next was colder and sharper than that. She leaned forward and said, calmly, "If we're being honest, Governor, let's begin with your facts," and in that moment, the balance of power shifted. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look at him until her second sentence, and somehow that cut deeper than yelling ever could. She laid it out plainly. How Abbott had signed off on $3.9 billion in education cuts in 2023. How over 200 schools lost essential staff. How nearly 1,000 teachers statewide left within 6 months. "My district didn't fail," she said, "it was sabotaged." She turned slightly to the camera. "And as for doing my job, I've spent every week in Oak Cliff and South Dallas listening to parents who work 2 jobs and still can't get their kids into classrooms with working heat. You want results? Start by funding classrooms." Her voice didn't waver. It hit like iron against marble. "You say I stir up drama? What I stir up is attention to the fact that kids in Duncanville sit 3 to a desk while private schools 2 miles away get state money for football stadiums. That's the real drama." Abbott opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Jasmine leaned in once more. "Let's stop pretending equity is about who yells the loudest. It's about who's listened to. And for years, the children in my district haven't been." The air changed. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. When the segment ended, no one moved. But outside, the reaction was instant. On Twitter, the clip exploded. One caption read, "She brought data, not drama." Another, "Abbott got cooked live." By the time Jasmine stepped out into the sunlight, her phone was buzzing uncontrollably. Her chief of staff, Shauna, had already left 3 missed calls and a voice memo. "You're blowing up." Like, actually blowing up. Jasmine didn't check social media immediately. She sat still in her car, staring at her hands. There wasn't pride there, not even relief, just a strange calm that comes after a confrontation, when the adrenaline hasn't quite worn off but the consequences are already forming like clouds on the horizon. She turned on the radio, only to hear her own name. Representative Crockett fired back at Governor Abbott in a stunning exchange now dominating online conversation. She turned it off. In the KCTX newsroom, producer Camille Juarez watched her phone ping nonstop as every major outlet, from local news to national giants, clipped the segment. Even ESPN retweeted it. A meme account posted a freeze frame of Abbott's stunned expression with the caption, "This is what happens when you think everyone's unarmed." In Austin, Abbott's comms office was in chaos. Why didn't he respond? One advisor barked. "We prepped him for emotional outbursts, not data." Another murmured, "She didn't lose her temper." She didn't even blink. Abbott himself said nothing. He sat back in his chair, jaw tight. He had weathered scandals before, but this wasn't a scandal. This was exposure. Later that evening, Jasmine met Shauna at a small Ethiopian restaurant in Lancaster. For a moment, they talked about anything but politics. Braces on Shauna's niece, the injera. The fact Jasmine hadn't had a day off in 8 weeks. Then Shauna's voice dropped. "They're going to come for you now," she said. Jasmine nodded, checked her phone. 7 death threats since we sat down. Shauna didn't blink. "We need security." Jasmine exhaled. "I'm not backing down." "I know," Shauna whispered. "But they won't come straight. They'll dig up high school records. Jokes you made 10 years ago, old tweets. That's how they play." Jasmine didn't respond. She knew. She'd been in politics long enough. But this was different. It wasn't the usual pushback. It was heat. Real heat. Meanwhile, in a high school in Waxahachie, a government teacher named Mr. Kimbrough played the video for his students. One student whispered, "She didn't blink." Another said, "She didn't take the bait. She just told the truth." In Dallas, an older couple watched the clip on the evening news. The husband muttered, "Finally, someone with guts." His wife, a retired teacher, nodded and didn't say a word. But not everyone was applauding. Within 12 hours, a conservative PAC released an ad. "Jasmine Crockett, too radical for Texas." Online trolls flooded her Instagram. Some comments were clumsy and blunt. Others were sharp and sinister. One simply said, "We know where your mother shops." Shauna panicked. "Jazz, this is next level. I'm calling private security." "We can't afford that," Jasmine murmured. "We can't afford not to," Shauna replied. Their young intern, Ruben, had already started tracking threats. "Some of these are burners," he said, "but some are real." Full names, photos. Jasmine didn't speak. She just kept scrolling. Shauna held up her phone. "What about this one?" It was a comment under a Facebook clip. "She better watch her back on 35 South." Jasmine read it, then quietly deleted it. The next few days blurred. Interview requests flooded in. NPR, The View, the Texas Tribune. Jasmine turned most of them down. "This isn't about fame," she told her team. "It's about fixing what started this." But silence didn't shield her. A columnist from Amarillo surfaced a 10-year-old tweet. "Jasmine, joking about Texas secession after a Cowboys playoff loss." The headline? "Crockett wants Texas to leave the Union." Shauna sighed. "They don't care about context. They just need something to swing with." "Let them swing," Jasmine muttered. But even her steel had limits. At 3 a.m., her phone rang. Her younger brother, Elijah. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah, just tired." Ma got a note on her car. Said, "Shut your sister up. She's not bulletproof." Jasmine went quiet. Then her voice dropped. "Call the police. File a report. I'll handle the rest." That morning, Jasmine showed up to work in a navy blazer and no makeup. Her team could tell something had changed. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't angry. She was calculating. "I want a town hall in Red Oak," she said. "No press. Just community." By noon, they had a school booked. That night, nearly 150 people packed into a cafeteria. Parents, teachers, grandparents. A few reporters crept in, silent in the back. Jasmine stood in front, no notes. "I've heard the noise," she said. "But I don't care about going viral. I care that your kids don't have what they need." A woman stood. Althea, late 50s, wore a hat that read, "Retired, not tired." "My granddaughter reads at a 3rd grade level and she's in 6th, she said. "They keep swapping teachers. Half of them don't stay." "A soundbite can't fix that," Jasmine replied. But funding might. Pressure might. That's why I need you here. Slow clapping began in the back. Then others joined, but not everyone was clapping. A man had been leaning against the far wall all night. Late 30s, scruffy beard, pressed denim shirt. Jasmine noticed him. Do you know him? Shauna whispered. No, Jasmine said, but he's been staring for 30 minutes. After the crowd thinned, he approached. Representative Crockett, he said, voice calm but too calm. My name's Derek Lang. I teach shop class in Corsicana. He looked around, then leaned in. You're not wrong about the system, but you're putting a target on your back. People in power don't like public school kids speaking up, especially not when they look like you. Jasmine's breath slowed. You think I don't know that? He smiled, just barely. I think you know exactly what you're doing. Shauna stepped in. You got a question, Mr. Lang? He shook his head. No, ma'am, just a warning. Then he walked out. Jasmine stared after him. Get his name, she whispered. I want to know who he really is. That night, Jasmine sat on her couch, mug untouched, Derek Lang's words echoing. Ruben texted her. Got a hit. Part-time teacher. Fired from security gig 3 years ago. Harassment complaints. Also showed up at anti-mask protests. Jasmine stared at the screen. Something wasn't adding up. The next morning, she met with a few other local reps in Tyler. It was supposed to be casual, coffee, policy talk. But the tension was thick. Representative Margot Delano leaned in. You stirred the pot, Jazz. People are nervous. Nervous about what? Jasmine asked. You embarrassed the governor on live TV. You didn't just talk about funding. You connected the dots. People don't want those dots connected. Another representative chimed in. I got donors asking if I'm the next Crockett. Jasmine stirred her coffee. So what do they want? Silence, Margot replied. No. Predictability. You gave them a wild card. Not if it tells the truth, Jasmine said. They don't care about truth. They care about control. As she got back in her car, Shauna sighed. They won't say it out loud, but they're scared. Scared this will cost them next election. Jasmine's reply was quiet but firm. Good. That means they weren't doing enough to begin with. And somewhere deep inside, a new question formed. Not just what she was willing to risk, but what they were so desperate to protect. That was the beginning of something far more dangerous. And Jasmine could feel it in her bones. The fight was about to shift again. This time, it would be bigger. And much, much darker. Jasmine Crockett didn't wait for permission. By the following morning, she had already requested school maintenance logs from 3 campuses in her district. What she got in return wasn't just negligence, it was a pattern. Unaddressed work orders, unresolved mold reports, heating issues logged multiple times and marked resolved when nothing had changed. But it was a phone call, not a document, that shifted everything. Lorraine Menser, a grandmother from Fannin Elementary, left 3 voicemails back to back, her voice cracking under urgency. Jasmine finally picked up on the 4th ring. Miss Crockett, I'm sorry to call. I know you're busy, but you need to come to Fannin. Something's not right. Fannin Elementary had always been on her radar. A brick building on Edgewood Street, built in the 60s and forgotten ever since. When she arrived, Lorraine was waiting, floral dress, gray hair, folder clutched tightly in one hand. They said the heat was fixed. She began without preamble. But my grandson's been wearing a coat all day inside. Yesterday a pipe burst. They just mopped it up. Didn't send the kids home. The front office smelled like bleach and mildew, a cocktail of cover-up and decay. Lorraine led her down the hallway. Classrooms had broken blinds, flickering lights. One boy was writing while wearing gloves. "Why are they wearing gloves?" Jasmine asked. "They leave the windows open during lunch." "Mold in the cafeteria," Lorraine replied. "Some kids don't eat at all. Their parents just pull them out." A teacher stepped out of room 24, chalk dust on her sleeve. "Didn't think you'd come," she said. "Admin told us not to make a fuss." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. "Who told you that?" "They said the state's watching. Complaints could get us flagged for closure." Jasmine's breath caught. "That's how they do it," the teacher said. "Let the place rot, then say it's unsalvageable." A boy peeked out of the room. "Are you the lady from TV?" "I guess I am." Jasmine smiled. "Can you fix the bathroom? It smells like sewer." She crouched down to meet his eyes. "I'm going to try." Outside, a Channel 8 news van had already pulled up. Word spreads fast when it's about kids. Shauna met Jasmine at the door. "Press wants a statement." Jasmine shook her head. "Not here. Not with the kids watching." At the edge of the parking lot, Jasmine gave her orders. "I want every maintenance report from the last 2 years. Staff complaints, state inspections. If I can't get them, I'll subpoena them." "You sure?" Shauna asked. "No," Jasmine answered, "but do it anyway." That night, a father named Jalen Howard posted a video from his car. "My daughter came home coughing black stuff again," he said, tears in his voice. "They told me it's just old vents. You know what old vents carry? Mold, rot, dust, but we're on the wrong side of the highway, so it's fine, right?" The video hit 400,000 views in under 24 hours. And then something clicked for Jasmine. This wasn't just underfunding. This was managed neglect. A quiet suffocation spread across zip codes. That realization brought her back to a memory she hadn't revisited in years. She was 9, sitting in the back row of Monroe Elementary. The heater never worked. The windows rattled. Desks wobbled. But her teacher, Mrs. Rollins, brought cocoa in a thermos every Monday and let early kids sit with her. One morning, she handed Jasmine a book. "Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry." "You've got a voice like this one," Mrs. Rollins said, tapping the page. Jasmine had carried that moment like a compass. Through her father's death, through high school debate, through college applications she filled out alone. That memory came rushing back so clearly it made her sit upright in bed. She called Shauna before sunrise. "Clear the day. No interviews. No calls. I need to go back." Ennis was just an hour away but felt like another lifetime. Dollar stores, faded signage, the same crooked basketball hoop on her old street. She pulled up to what used to be Monroe Elementary. The sign now read, "District Storage Facility." Boarded windows, peeling paint, silence. She parked and walked to the fence. No one stopped her. No one needed to. She stood in front of the building, eyes on the second window from the left, the one she used to stare out of. "I see you now," she whispered to her younger self. She called Shauna again. "I want to bring them in." "Who?" "Parents, teachers, kids, anyone Abbott's bill is about to run over." "For what?" "For the hearing. For the cameras. They deserve to be in the room." "Okay," Shauna replied. "Also, get me that old photo, me, Mrs. Rollins, and the paper globe we made." "I'll find it." Jasmine hung up and stared ahead. The fight had always been about numbers. But now it was about faces. About the children no one wanted on camera. 2 days before the televised hearing, Jasmine held a community circle at a rec center in Oak Cliff. No press, no aides, just folding chairs and a single mic. A cafeteria worker named Maria spoke first. "I sneak food into trays. That's how budget cuts look to me." A student named Braxton held up his textbook. Pages are missing. I just Google stuff and hope it's right. A mother, Simone, played an audio clip of her 6-year-old coughing. That's what mold does to his lungs, she said, voice cracking. Jasmine didn't speak much, she just listened. When it was done, Shauna leaned in. You really want to bring them to the Capitol? Not all, Jasmine said. The right ones, and not just in the building. I want them in the frame. You mean on live TV? Exactly. That's going to set off alarms. Good, Jasmine replied. They've been comfortable for too long. The morning of the hearing, the Capitol was buzzing. Lobbyists whispering, aides pacing, protesters holding signs. Fund schools, not stadiums, next to Crockett is chaos. Abbott planned to appear in person. No pre-recorded remarks, no stand-ins. Jasmine knew this wasn't about policy anymore. This was about power. He wanted to make an example out of her. She brought more than her voice. She brought Braxton, Simone, Maria, even Mr. Vargas, a janitor from South Polk Middle who barely spoke English but insisted on testifying. They sat in the front row. Real, undeniable. When Jasmine's name was called, she stood and motioned for the others to stand with her. I've brought some voices with me today, she said. People who live what we're talking about. The moderator frowned. This isn't standard procedure. It's not a standard problem, Jasmine replied. And people deserve more than standard answers. Maria spoke first. I feed 312 kids a day. Sometimes what I sneak into their tray is the only real food they get. Simone followed. My daughter missed 15 days because of her asthma. They said it was dust from renovations. There were no renovations. Braxton held up his torn book. This is what I'm supposed to learn from. Would you? Each testimony cut deeper. By the time Jasmine returned to the mic, the panel was silent. You can vote however you want, she said. But you'll never again say we didn't show you the truth. A reporter stopped her in the hallway. Don't you think this display was too emotional? Jasmine paused. No, it was too honest for some people. That's different. The clip went viral. Again. This time, it wasn't just about her. It was about them. And it worked. 3 swing district Republicans pulled their support from the bill. Not a win, but a stall. A crack in the wall. Back in her apartment, Jasmine scrolled through her messages. One stood out. A photo of her car. Slashed tire. No caption. Just the image. Shauna sat with her that night. Do you regret it? She asked. Not for a second, Jasmine replied. But she knew this wasn't the peak. It was the beginning of the next climb. And the forces she'd stirred weren't going to rest. They were regrouping, planning, and the next strike wouldn't be a tweet or a headline. It would be something far darker, far more dangerous. By the next week, the Capitol Rotunda had turned into a pressure cooker, the kind of place where history pretends to whisper but power shouts in every direction. The vote on Abbott's education bill had been rescheduled, but this time, there would be no substitutes, no spokespersons. Governor Greg Abbott was coming in person, not to defend policy, but to reclaim narrative. It wasn't about passing the bill anymore. It was about silencing the woman who dared to challenge him with facts, composure, and a room full of invisible voices suddenly made visible. Jasmine Crockett arrived early that morning, flanked not by security but by the same people who had testified beside her. Braxton wore his school jacket, gripping a folder of torn textbook scans and screenshots. Simone held her daughter's hand, while Maria carried a cafeteria tray, still stained from real use. Even Mr. Vargas came, silent but solid, the weight of a mop and 1,000 ignored hours behind his shoulders. They entered the Capitol together. At the chamber doors, a guard hesitated, eyeing the unofficial entourage. "They're with me," Jasmine said, her voice neither raised nor shaken. The guard checked the list, then slowly nodded them through. Inside, the room buzzed with anticipation. Abbott entered moments later, slow and deliberate, surrounded by aides who had rehearsed this moment a dozen times. He didn't glance at Jasmine, but the faint tug at the edge of his mouth, a smirk sharpened over decades, spoke volumes. When his name was called, he took the mic and delivered his lines like a man who thought the script had already been approved. "This bill," he said, "ensures freedom of choice, removes bureaucratic deadweight, and puts power where it belongs, with parents." Polished, mechanical, hollow. Some polite applause followed. Jasmine didn't clap. She didn't even blink. When her turn came, she didn't walk directly to the mic. She turned instead to the chairman and asked, "Is this session live streamed?" The room hesitated. "Yes," the chairman replied. "It's a public session." "Good," she said, then walked away, from the mic, from the podium, from the stage they'd set for her to lose on. Cameras scrambled to follow her, producers panicking in the control room. She opened a side door and walked down a narrow hallway, the lens trailing just behind. "This," she said, speaking not to the room but to the nation, "is what you weren't supposed to see." She stepped into a small waiting room where 8 parents sat, some with tears in their eyes, others with folders in their laps, all carrying stories that had been ignored for years. She motioned for Maria, who stepped forward and held up the tray. "This is lunch for some of our kids. Powdered potatoes and frozen peas. That's not education reform. That's punishment." A father named Corey took the mic next. "My son rides 2 buses now. His old school shut down last spring. We got a letter, but no answers. No one told us why." One by one, they spoke. They didn't shout. They didn't dramatize. They just told the truth, and truth, when unfiltered, sounds like thunder in rooms built to muffle it. The live feed never cut. Back in the main chamber, Abbott sat frozen, his staff whispering urgently, but the camera wasn't on him anymore. The spotlight had shifted, and he couldn't wrest it back. When Jasmine returned 25 minutes later, the hearing room was silent, not with confusion but with realization. She took the mic, looked at the panel, and said, "You asked what the problem is. We just showed you. Now decide if you're going to keep pretending." No one moved, not even Abbott. That moment, that exact walkout and return, became the most watched political video in Texas history. It reached 3.4 million views in 48 hours. Abbott's approval among urban independents dropped 5 points in a week. But that wasn't what stayed with Jasmine. It was Braxton, waiting quietly outside by her car with a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her and left without a word. Under the dome light, she unfolded the note. "I didn't think adults could tell the truth like that. I do now." She read it 3 times. Then again in the morning. But the fight wasn't over. Headlines moved on. A scandal broke in San Antonio. A tech billionaire launched a Senate campaign. The media attention scattered like dust. But inside Jasmine's office, the aftermath roared. Her desk overflowed with handwritten letters. Teachers from Houston, parents from Michigan, even students from Idaho. One note simply read, "You didn't just speak, you made it okay for the rest of us to speak too." The bill itself stalled, technically still alive, but functionally gutted. 3 moderate Republicans had withdrawn support after the broadcast, citing Jasmine's testimony as a turning point. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it wasn't a guaranteed loss either. And that changed the map. The photo of her and Mrs. Rollins now hung in a plain black frame on the office wall. 9-year-old Jasmine with a paper globe in one hand and a library book in the other, her teacher's hand steady on her shoulder. She hadn't told anyone she cried when she found it. Shauna knocked. Channel 4 wants a sit-down. Big feature. They'll follow you through the district. Jasmine paused. I'll think about it. It'd be good for. I said I'll think about it. What she didn't say was that she didn't want cameras right now. Not out of fear, but out of weight. Because she finally understood how heavy the spotlight really was. Instead, she went back to the schools. Quietly. No announcements. No tweets. At Fannin Elementary, she sat in the back of a 4th grade classroom while a girl read aloud from holes, tripping over a few words, then correcting herself with a small fist pump. Jasmine smiled. The teacher saw her and nodded. Jasmine lifted her coffee cup in return. At South Polk Middle, she toured the cafeteria. New vents, clean tiles, fresh paint, not everything, but enough to matter. She spoke with Mr. Vargas. Everything feel different? She asked. Not yet, he said. But the kids smile more now. That's something. Outside, a little girl approached with a drawing. 2 stick figures. One clearly Jasmine, curly hair, blue dress, standing at a microphone. The other a child, smaller, holding a book. The caption read, "Thank you for letting us talk too." Jasmine bent down. What's your name? Aubrey. You like drawing? Aubrey nodded. I want to be an art teacher. Then you better make sure they fund your classroom, Jasmine said. Aubrey grinned and ran back to her friends. That night, Jasmine drove back to Ennis. Not for a speech, not for strategy, just for silence. She parked near Monroe Elementary again. Still boarded, still broken. But this time, she walked around to the back, to where the playground used to be. She sat on the edge of a rusted bench where she once ate lunch with LaShonda, pulled out her phone and hit record. No production, no lighting, just her. To the kids in classrooms with no heat. To the teachers grading essays in their cars because they worked 2 jobs. To the parents who show up even when no one listens. You're not background noise. You're the headline. And I'll keep fighting for you, whether there's a camera or not. She hit send. The video reached over 1 million views in 2 days. But that didn't matter anymore. Because Jasmine Crockett had finally understood something most politicians never do. Truth doesn't need to go viral. It just needs to be said. Again, and again, until the right people finally hear it. So she kept saying it. And she kept showing up. Because some battles don't end with applause. They end with warm classrooms, clean textbooks, and a child at the back of the room raising their hand for the very first time. It didn't take long for the opposition to find its new angle. When they realized they couldn't silence Jasmine Crockett through insults or distractions, they shifted to retaliation masked as policy. A headline appeared that looked innocuous at first glance. Governor Abbott proposes emergency education adjustment bill, district realignments on the table. The language was bureaucratic, sterile, just vague enough to escape alarm. But Shauna read the fine print first. He's targeting Title III, she whispered, her voice catching. That covers 80% of our ESL programs. This isn't reform. This is revenge. Jasmine took the document, her eyes scanning each clause, each term rebranded to sound neutral. Resource optimization, it said. Administrative flexibility, strategic redistribution. But she could see it clearly. It was precision punishment, cloaked in politeness. And it hit where it hurt most. Not her. The kids. The families. The classrooms that had become her front line. Rubin confirmed the worst. The money's being rerouted to charter networks in Frisco, Plano, districts that already have digital whiteboards and AC in every hallway. It was a gut punch. Not just because of what it would do, but because Abbott had made it sound like a good thing. Jasmine responded with urgency: press conferences, committee hearings, letters to editors. But the machine was already moving. Votes lined up in quiet rooms behind closed doors. Margot Delano pulled her aside. "You embarrassed him, Jasmine. He's showing you what that costs. He's showing everyone." Jasmine fired back. "I didn't start this to stay quiet." "You didn't start it to be gutted either," Margot replied. "And he's not just coming after you. He's going after the kids who made you care." Jasmine knew it. Every sanitized phrase in that bill had teeth. It would slash reading aids, cut after-school tutoring, eliminate bilingual support under the guise of efficiency. It was designed to look reasonable, because if it looked cruel, it might get stopped. And yet, in real time, the cruelty began to show. Fannin Elementary lost 2 reading specialists in 5 days. Pleasant Grove eliminated its after-school program entirely. Parents cried at school board meetings. "They told us the bill would bring opportunity," one mother shouted, her voice cracking. "How is cutting teachers bringing more?" Jasmine stood behind the podium and said it plainly: "They lied. But they did it legally." And in that moment, she realized she wasn't just fighting the lie. She was fighting the entire system built to hide it. Then came a request that felt like bait. A state-run network wanted a live debate between Jasmine and Governor Abbott. To clear the air, they claimed. Shauna bristled. "It's a setup. They'll call it both sides and let him lie unchallenged." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Good," she said. "Let him lie. I'll be ready." But she wasn't going in alone. 2 days before the debate, she drove an hour outside Waco to a quiet assisted living facility. No cameras, no staffers. She was there for one person: Mrs. Geraldine Strickland, her 4th grade teacher. The woman who once told her, "When people stop listening, speak like you're the only one telling the truth." Mrs. Strickland was older now, thinner, in a wheelchair, but her eyes were still sharp. "You made the governor look like a substitute teacher," she joked as soon as Jasmine entered. Jasmine laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it was genuine. "I'm about to be on again. Thought I'd bring some reminders." She showed her letters, photos, testimonies. "You're not going to win this round," Mrs. Strickland said softly. Jasmine blinked. "Excuse me? They've already decided," she said. "This next debate, it's not for them. It's for the people who think they're alone. Remind them they're not." Jasmine returned to Austin with her head clear. She rehearsed her points, practiced her delivery, but mostly, she held onto that line: remind them they're not alone. The night before the debate, she met with a small group of families in the basement of a church. No speeches, just conversation. She sat cross-legged in a metal chair, listening to stories of crumbling walls, textbooks from the 90s, classrooms so crowded kids sat on the floor. She asked only one thing: "Will you come with me tomorrow?" And they said yes. When the cameras turned on the next morning, the studio lights bright but cold, Abbott walked in with practiced calm. His team had graphs, polished talking points, probably even Oppo research just in case. Jasmine walked in with 6 people behind her: parents, a teacher, a cafeteria worker, a student, a custodian, and a retired grandmother. She didn't introduce them, she just let them sit in the front row. The host opened the segment with rehearsed neutrality. "We're joined by Governor Greg Abbott and Representative Jasmine Crockett for a civil discussion on education reform in Texas." Abbott went first. He stuck to his lines. "This bill is about choice. It removes waste. It empowers parents." Jasmine listened, waited. When it was her turn, she didn't even look at him. She turned to the camera. Choice is only real if you actually have options, she began. When your school closes, when your bus route is cut, when your only lunch is powdered mash and canned peas, what kind of choice is that? She gestured toward Maria, seated behind her. She feeds hundreds of children every day. Not from a budget, from what she sneaks in to supplement it. You think that's choice? That's desperation. The camera cut to Abbott, who shuffled his papers. Jasmine didn't stop. This isn't about red or blue. It's about right and wrong. And what's wrong is when a bill takes from the most vulnerable and wraps it in a bow labeled reform. Abbott interjected, trying to regain ground. Representative Crockett, we've allocated historic funds to schools across. No, she said sharply, still calm. You've reallocated. There's a difference. You took from Fannin Elementary and gave it to campuses that already have more than enough. That's not investment. That's abandonment. The air shifted. The host tried to pivot. Let's hear from one of the parents. Jasmine held up her hand. They don't need to speak today. You've heard them already. You just didn't listen. The segment ended with polite sign-offs, but the moment had already moved past politeness. Viewers saw it. They felt it, and by the next morning, #Listen to Crockett was trending nationwide. Abbott's office issued no statement. His comms director refused interviews. Behind the scenes, phones were slammed, emails leaked, and donors started asking questions. But Jasmine didn't stop there. She took the momentum and aimed it precisely. She scheduled 3 more town halls. This time in places Abbott's policies had hit hardest: Corsicana, Pleasant Grove, Tyler. She didn't just speak, she brought proof. Broken books, photos of rotting ceilings, audio recordings of parents crying. In Corsicana, a janitor held up a rusted vent filter and said, "This is what my son breathes." Not policy. This. In Tyler, a grandmother pulled a desk lamp from her tote bag. "My grandson does homework under this. Because the lights at school haven't worked in 2 years." And in each town, Jasmine repeated one thing. This is not politics. This is the price of being invisible. The final blow came not from her, but from a 12-year-old girl in a school sweatshirt who raised her hand in the back row and asked, "Why does the governor think we don't matter?" Jasmine didn't answer. She just handed her the mic. "Ask him yourself," she said. And that night, the video went viral again. But this time, it wasn't Jasmine in the frame. It was a child, unshaken, unafraid, asking the one question no grown man in power had been able to answer. 3 weeks passed, and the storm that had once circled Jasmine Crockett like a hurricane now pulsed beneath the surface, quieter but heavier, like an undertow. The headlines moved on, pulled elsewhere by scandal in San Antonio, a tech billionaire's Senate campaign, and the ever-churning noise of a political news cycle always hungry for the next outrage. But inside her office, nothing had quieted. The stack of letters on her desk grew thicker by the day. Notes from teachers in Amarillo, parents in Baton Rouge, even students from Michigan and Idaho. Some were long, typed, formal. Others were messy, handwritten in pencil, marked with eraser smudges and spelling mistakes. One simply read, "You didn't just speak. You made it okay for the rest of us to speak too." The bill still lingered in the House like smoke after a fire. Technically alive, but badly weakened. The 3 Republican moderates who had pulled support after her televised walkout hadn't changed their minds. They cited unanswered district-level impact questions, but everyone knew it was the stories they couldn't unsee: the cafeteria tray, the slashed programs, the kids who knew more about survival than learning. It wasn't a clean win, not yet, but it wasn't the defeat Abbott had planned, and that mattered. On the wall beside her desk hung a photo Jasmine had nearly forgotten until Ruben found it on a thumb drive buried in a district archive folder. It showed a much younger her, 9 years old, smiling too wide, holding a paper globe in one hand and a copy of Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry in the other. Behind her stood Mrs. Rollins, her old teacher, hand resting on her shoulder, eyes steady. Jasmine hadn't told anyone she cried when she framed it. She kept it close not because it was nostalgic, but because it reminded her why she could never back down. Shauna stuck her head in the doorway. Channel 4 wants to shadow you again. Full segment. They'll follow your rounds. Talk to your staff. Big reach. Jasmine looked up, her fingers resting on a sealed envelope addressed to a 4th grade student who'd sent her a crayon drawing of a school with no roof and the words, "Please fix." She didn't even lift her voice. "I'll think about it." Shauna lingered, then nodded. Jasmine didn't need the coverage. Not now. Not because the spotlight scared her, but because she had learned what it felt like to carry it too long without breaking. And she didn't need more applause. She needed results. So, she returned to the schools. Quietly. No announcements, no press releases. At Fannin Elementary, she sat in the back of a 4th grade room and listened as a girl read from Because of Winn-Dixie, her voice shaking at first, then stronger with every sentence. The teacher, Ms. Delancey, caught Jasmine's eye, nodded once, and said nothing. Jasmine lifted her coffee in reply. At South Polk, she walked the halls slowly, inspecting the new vents, clean floors, working heaters. Mr. Vargas greeted her with a half nod and said, "Not perfect. But it smells better now." Jasmine smiled. "That's a start." A small girl with braids approached her near the front entrance, clutching a folded drawing. Jasmine knelt. The girl opened it carefully. Stick figures on a stage, one clearly Jasmine, speaking into a mic. The other was a child in a wheelchair, smiling. The caption said, "Thank you for letting us talk too." Jasmine asked, "What's your name?" "Aubrey." "You like drawing?" Aubrey nodded. "I want to be an art teacher." Jasmine tucked the picture into her bag and said, "Then you make sure they keep funding your classroom." The girl beamed. As the sun began to set, Jasmine drove back toward Ennis. Not for a speech, not for strategy, just to remember. She parked near the back of Monroe Elementary again, still boarded up, still lifeless. She walked around to the rear playground, where weeds grew through the cracks of what used to be blacktop. The bench where she and LaShonda once shared peanut butter sandwiches still leaned crooked, as if time had forgotten to finish breaking it. Jasmine sat there, pulled out her phone, and hit record. No crew, no staging, just her voice in the evening quiet. To the kids doing homework in dark apartments because the lights don't work at school. To the teachers who buy their own supplies, and the janitors who fix things no one even notices. To the parents who stay at board meetings even when they're told their voices don't count. You are not background noise. You are the headline, and I will keep showing up for you, whether there's a camera or not. She hit send. The video reached over 1 million views in 48 hours, but Jasmine barely noticed. She didn't check analytics anymore. She checked air vents, cafeteria menus, attendance logs, because some stories don't end with viral moments. They end with working heaters, with math tutors hired back, with a child, who once sat silent, finally raising their hand and saying, "I understand." Weeks later, during an impromptu visit to Red Oak Middle School, Jasmine saw Braxton again. He was taller now, less guarded. He handed her another envelope, this time with no words. Just a flash drive. She opened it that night. Inside were video interviews he'd conducted with classmates. a girl who shared a Chromebook with 2 siblings, a boy who translated every assignment for his parents, a teacher who spent her weekends repainting the classroom walls. I want to help now, his final message said. I want to tell their stories too. Jasmine stared at the screen, then whispered, then let's make sure they're heard. And that was the shift. It wasn't just about her voice anymore. It was about making space for the voices no one had heard in years. And the cost? The wait? The late-night calls? The slashed tires? The threats? The exhaustion so thick it stuck to her skin? It was still there, but so was something else: momentum, trust, and the quiet revolution of people realizing they didn't have to wait for permission to demand more. Jasmine Crockett never called herself a hero. She never branded her work as brave. But when she showed up, day after day, mic or not, she proved something louder than slogans. She proved that real change isn't sparked by shouting. It's built by showing up when no one else will, by staying in rooms when others leave, by speaking even when your voice shakes, especially then. And so she kept speaking. She kept walking into crumbling schools and listening to trembling voices. Because the fight for education wasn't about policy. It was about presence. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of the school you went to, the teacher who changed you, or the voice you forgot you still had, don't scroll past. Don't wait for someone else. Share it, speak it, show up, because the fight for better schools, for better futures, for better truths, it doesn't need another hero. It needs all of us.